Professor Elias Vance, a leading expert in exoplanetary socio-economics and interstellar trade agreements, had always prided himself on his ability to untangle the most convoluted galactic disputes. He'd thought mediating between the resource-rich Cathar and the technologically advanced Xylos on a complex mineral rights issue couldn't possibly be more challenging than convincing the university board that his department's budget needed a significant increase for a new interstellar tea leaf reading initiative. He was, to his escalating dismay, profoundly mistaken. The Xylos Collective has formally accused the Cathar hegemony of violating the Interstellar Resource Accords, intoned Elder Varnes 7, a Concordium representative whose multifaceted head shimmered with shifting light, making him seem both ancient and perpetually annoyed. They demand immediate restitution for the unauthorized harvesting of crystalline resonance from the disputed asteroid field. Elias looked around the shimmering crystal conference room, a dizzying expanse of light and alien forms. "Excuse me, they've accused them of what now?" "Illegal resonance extraction," Varnes 7 repeated, with the flat, unenthusiastic tone of a data chip being read. The Xylos claim this crystalline resonance is vital for their bio-integrative technology. The Cathar, on the other hand, insist it's merely a byproduct of their standard mining operations and is, furthermore, highly irritating. "Highly irritating," Elias echoed slowly. "Right, and you want me to, what exactly?" "Devise a mutually agreeable compensation plan, outlining the unique properties of said resonance and its perceived value to each party." The chamber emitted a series of clicks and whistles that Elias had learned to interpret as alien sighs of exasperation. Professor Vance, another representative, chimed in, this one resembling a floating nebula with faint internal glows. "You are Terra's foremost expert on unconventional resource valuation. We require your assessment of this crystalline resonance, specifically whether its absence poses any actual threat to the Xylos Collective, or if this is merely a territorial display." Elias stared at the assembled delegates. 23 different species, each more bizarre than the last, all looking at him with the patient expectation of creditors awaiting payment. "You're asking me if these glowing rocks are dangerous? What did you call them?" "Crystalline resonance," Varnes 7 clarified. "The Xylos claim it resonates with their bio-neural networks, enhancing their cognitive processes. Without it, they say, their collective intelligence diminishes. They find this incredibly alarming." "Sounds absolutely delightful," Elias muttered. "And the Cathar find its presence incredibly annoying," confirmed the nebula-like alien. "They claim it interferes with their seismic sensors and makes their ships vibrate unpleasantly during warp travel. Their delegation considered the Xylos's claims to be exaggerated theatricality and requested permission to simply ignore them." Elias felt that familiar prickle at the base of his skull, the one that always preceded his most creative and often controversial policy proposals. It was the same sensation he'd had right before convincing the university that theoretical economics could solve campus parking issues. "I see," he said carefully, "and you want my professional opinion on whether this resonance is truly essential or just a very shiny point of contention." 20 minutes later, Elias found himself in what the Concordium politely called a cross-cultural arbitration chamber, and what he mentally categorized as the galaxy's most expensive therapy room. The Cathar delegation consisted of two individuals who resembled immense six-legged scorpions made of polished obsidian. The largest, clearly the negotiator, stood nearly 4 meters tall and articulated with the deep, resonant hum of tectonic plates shifting. His name was Grax. "Terran," Grax rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "We are told your species excels at untangling convoluted data streams. We find this intriguing." Elias looked up at the towering alien. Something clicked into place in his mind. It was the same feeling he'd had when dissecting the intricate web of global supply chains or analyzing the psychological profiles of particularly stubborn academics. Pattern recognition was his specialty, and he was suddenly seeing some very interesting patterns. "You're intrigued," Elias said, "because the Xylos's claims about this resonance are difficult to quantify, aren't they?" "Indeed," Grax replied. "We speak of cognitive diminishment and neural harmony. We speak of measurable energy signatures and economic output. The Concordium insists we find a fair resolution, yet the very concept of fair appears to shift with each species' metabolic rate." "Metabolic rates," Elias repeated. He thought about the humans he'd studied, mathematicians obsessed with elegant proofs, engineers who built impossible structures, artists who found meaning in abstract forms. "That's an interesting assessment of value." "The Xylos presented their species specifications," interjected the second Cathar. "They showed us elaborate diagrams of neural pathways and a complex biofeedback loop supposedly impacted by the resonance. Yet when we offered a perfectly viable synthetic alternative, they refused, citing spiritual impurity. Your average human lifespan is barely a standard galactic century, yet you grasp the nuances of abstract value better than most." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "And you're looking for a solution that's practical, measurable, and doesn't involve giving up your mining profits." "Exactly," Grax said. "We require a resolution that respects our resource claims, upholds Concordium law, and ideally allows us to resume our operations without the Xylos's persistent high-frequency wailing." "I see," Elias said. He was quiet for a long moment, studying the two Cathar. They were magnificent, he had to admit, perfectly optimized for resource extraction on high-gravity worlds, with a logical framework built on efficiency and tangible output. They'd probably never encountered a problem they couldn't solve with sheer force or straightforward engineering. "And so, may I ask," he said finally, "what's the most complex problem your hegemony has ever resolved?" The two Cathar exchanged subtle antenna movements. "The rerouting of the Gamma-9 asteroid belt to optimize mineral yield," the second Cathar chimed in with obvious pride. "A task requiring the synchronized gravitational manipulation of 73 lunar bodies. We lost no workers, though several seismic regulators were challenged." Elias nodded. "Well, I suppose I should warn you about humans, then." "Warn us?" Grax leaned forward, a low hum emanating from his carapace. "We are Cathar. We are the architects, not the mediators." "Oh, I'm sure you are. But humans are different. We're not like the Xylos with their bio-integrative needs. We can't shift asteroids with our minds." He paused. "We do something far more insidious."
"Which is?" Grax asked. Elias looked directly at him, and for the first time since entering the room, he smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who'd spent decades dissecting the illogical, the emotionally driven, the utterly irrational corners of galactic economics. Someone who documented how sentient beings made decisions based on feelings, not facts. "We find the loopholes," he said simply, "and we redefine the game." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, though Elias suspected it was entirely psychological. The Cathar delegation suddenly looked less confident, though Elias wasn't sure if they fully understood why. "You see," he continued, "humans have this interesting cognitive bias. We don't just solve problems according to existing rules. We question the rules themselves. Every time someone presents us with a fixed system, we find its vulnerabilities. We study the unspoken assumptions, understand the blind spots, and then we share that information with others." "All species innovate," the second Cathar said, but there was something less certain in his voice. "Do they?" Elias asked. "Because humans have turned recontextualization into a survival strategy. We don't just adapt to challenges, we reframe them permanently. We've optimized entire planetary ecosystems not through brute force, but through superior understanding of complex interdependencies. We've navigated our own planet not through inherent strengths, but through the ability to imagine and implement radically new solutions." He stood up, which brought him to roughly eye level with Gryak's lower carapace. "We've been surviving ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and plagues that killed 90% of our population. And you know what we did after each catastrophe? We built entire academic fields dedicated to understanding why it happened, not just how to endure it. We even turned the very concept of failure into a fundamental component of our iterative design process, rather than a deterrent." The Cathar were very still now, their multiple eyes fixed on him with the focused attention of engineers who'd suddenly realized their equations might have hidden variables. "But here's the really interesting part," Elias continued. "Humans don't just learn from their own experiences, we learn from everyone's experiences. Every time someone presents us with an unsolvable problem, we dissect their methodology. Every time someone creates an unbreakable system, we analyze its theoretical limits. And then we teach every other human exactly how to exploit those limits." "You are describing systematic analysis," Gryax said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Systematic analysis," Elias agreed, "except humans have been doing it for 3 million years. We've been at the bottom of the galactic food chain for most of our history. We've been outmatched in strength, speed, and raw processing power by everything from single-celled organisms to each other. And you know what? We're still here. Every single unbreakable system that tried to constrain us, we turned it into a case study in our historical archives." He walked closer to Gryax, close enough that he had to crane his neck to look at him. "So yes, we're fragile. We break easily. We die from things that wouldn't even dent a Cathar. But we're also the species that looked at the vastness of space and said, 'I'm going to figure out how to own that.' We're the species that looked at incomprehensible alien technology and said, 'I'm going to figure out how to repurpose that.' We're the species that looked at galactic trade and said, 'I'm going to figure out how to dominate that.'"
The largest Cathar took a subtle step back. "And now," Elias said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "you have dispute that the entire Concordium can't solve? You want to know if this crystalline resonance has actual value?
You want to find a fair resolution?" The room was dead silent. Elias continued, "I wonder if you've considered what happens to systems that humans decide are inefficient. Would you like me to show you our historical records on economic disruptions? Perhaps a theoretical framework for how to collapse an interstellar market without firing a single weapon?" Before any of the Cathar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the room in pulsing red, and a voice came over the intercom speaking in rapid-fire galactic common. "What's happening?" Elias asked. Grox's carapace vibrated as he processed the announcement. When he looked back at Elias, his multifaceted eyes were wide with what might have been curiosity, laced with a hint of confusion. "It appears," he said slowly, "that a Terran vessel has just entered the system. They are requesting immediate access to the Concordium network, and they have specifically asked to speak with you regarding expedited arbitration protocols." "An expedited arbitration vessel? That's impossible. Terra doesn't have such things." "According to the announcement," the second Cathar said, "the vessel identifies itself as the UNS Negotiator. They claim to be responding to an unforeseen diplomatic bottleneck involving Professor Elias Vance, and they are requesting immediate data uplink and direct negotiation access." "But I didn't send any request for expedited arbitration," Elias protested. The Concordium's nebula-like representative, who'd been silently observing, glowed a little brighter. "Professor Vance," it hummed, "according to our real-time network analysis, the Terran vessel is not requesting access, they are demanding it, and they have indicated that if direct negotiation channels are not established within 1 standard hour, they will consider this a preemptive declaration of systemic inefficiency and will proceed with unilateral restructuring of all affected trade protocols." Elias stared at the Cathar delegation and the Concordium representative. That's insane. Humans don't have unilateral restructuring protocols for galactic trade." "Perhaps," Grox said quietly, "you should contact your people and inform them of this aggressive overreach." But as the alarms continued to blare and the emergency lights painted the room in blood-red shadows, Elias began to suspect that the overreach might in fact be his. The communication screen flickered to life, revealing a face that made Elias's heart skip approximately 3 beats. Chancellor Anya Sharma looked exactly like what would happen if you took a career diplomat, subjected her to 20 years of interstellar bureaucracy, and then told her that someone had delayed her favorite academic's research. "Professor Vance," Chancellor Sharma said, her voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded exceptionally complex legal battles, "are you experiencing any informational discrepancies?" "Anaya," Elias stared at the screen, "what in the galaxy are you doing here? And what's this about unilateral restructuring?" "Terra has had a new diplomatic expedience corps for 6 months, Professor Vance. We've repurposed several of your university's theoretical economics models and applied them to real-time galactic diplomacy. Are you experiencing any informational discrepancies?" She repeated, "I'm fine, but you're being held hostage by bureaucratic inefficiency." Elias looked around the room. The 2 Cathar negotiators were standing very still, their multifaceted eyes fixed on the screen with the focused attention of entities who'd suddenly realized they might be in the presence of something far more strategically complex than themselves. "Not exactly," Elias said. "I'm here as a consultant, but Anya, how did you even know I was here?" Your latest research paper on the subtleties of interspecies resource valuation was flagged by our automated monitoring systems when you began this arbitration, Chancellor Sharma said. We tracked your location through your Concordium-issued datapad. My datapad? The one we got last month? Standard procedure for all Terran citizens consulting beyond the solar system. Chancellor Sharma's expression didn't change. Professor Vance, I'm going to need you to step away from the inefficient data exchange. They're not inefficient, Elias protested. They're just having trouble quantifying the Exul's claims, but they're not technically inefficient yet. Chancellor Sharma's expression remained perfectly neutral, which in Elias's experience meant someone was about to witness something that would require significant conceptual reevaluation later. Anya, what exactly are you authorized to do here? Whatever is necessary to ensure the efficient flow of Terran intellectual capital and economic prosperity, Chancellor Sharma replied. The Galactic Concordium has been informed that any impedance to human progress will be met with appropriate strategic realignment. Strategic realignment? Elias repeated. From Terra? Which has been in formal contact with the galactic community for exactly 6 months? 7 months, Professor, Chancellor Sharma corrected. And we learn very quickly how to optimize under duress. Grax, who'd been listening to this exchange with growing alarm, took a subtle step forward. Chancellor Sharma, there has been a misunderstanding. We have not impeded Professor Vance. We merely wished to discuss—
You wish to discuss the inherent irrationality of subjective value, Chancellor Sharma said. Her voice remained perfectly level, but somehow the data stream in the room seemed to flow faster. Is that correct? Well, yes, but— And you consider human approaches to complex, non-quantifiable problems to be unconventional? We were evaluating the possibility. I see. Chancellor Sharma was quiet for a moment. Professor Vance, I need you to move to the far side of the room. Wait, because I'm about to demonstrate why humans are not suitable for conventional diplomatic bottlenecks. Elias looked at the Tucathar, who were now backing away from the communication screen like it might emit a spreadsheet of doom. Anya, what are you going to do? I'm going to show them our galactic integration blueprint, specifically our optimizing inefficient bureaucracies module. Your what? The screen flickered, and suddenly Elias was looking at what appeared to be a highly stylized infographic. The title read, Terran Diplomatic Expedience Corps, Streamlining Galactic Interactions. The background music was a strangely catchy, algorithmically generated jingle. This is propaganda, Grax said, his hum a little higher pitched. Your species has been part of the galactic community for mere months. You cannot possibly have developed significant diplomatic leverage. The video began with sweeping data visualizations of Earth's rapidly expanding economic networks, then transitioned to images of humans in various problem-solving environments. Whiteboards covered with complex equations, debate halls, brainstorming sessions. The narrator spoke in the kind of enthusiastic voice typically reserved for stock market reports. For 3 million years, humans have been the most adaptable problem solvers on Terra, the narrator explained. We've survived environmental collapse, social upheaval, and theoretical paradoxes. We've turned every challenge into an opportunity for systemic improvement. The video cut to footage of humans in high-pressure negotiation scenarios, international summits, corporate mergers, family holiday dinners. We've learned to thrive in conditions that would paralyze most species with indecision.
We've developed methodologies that allow us to resolve any conflict, from interstellar trade wars to quantum entanglement lawsuits. This is basic adaptive analytics, the second Cathar said, but his own analytical processes seemed to be struggling. Then came first contact, the narrator continued. The video showed the arrival of the first Concordium delegation, the establishment of diplomatic relations, and the overwhelming amount of paperwork. We learned that we were not alone in the galaxy. We learned that there were species that viewed complex problems as insurmountable obstacles. We learned that the galaxy was not the streamlined, efficient marketplace we had hoped for. The video cut to what appeared to be a vast data center. Humans in crisp uniforms were manipulating holographic displays, running simulations, and debating policy frameworks. So we did what humans do best. We optimized. We took the ingenuity of our innovators, the analytical minds of our theoreticians, and the sheer tenacity of our negotiators, and we pointed it all at a single problem: galactic inefficiency. Grax was now backing toward the door. This is a statistical anomaly. Your species lacks the historical precedents for effective galactic mediation. We don't need historical precedents, the narrator explained cheerfully. We have something better. We have iterative design.
The video showed simulated negotiations, not the slow, multi-year processes the Concordium employed, but rapid-fire AI-driven simulations that resolved centuries-old disputes in mere hours. In 6 months, we've developed arbitration models specifically designed to bypass every known bureaucratic bottleneck in the galaxy. We've studied their protocols, analyzed their cognitive biases, and created accelerated resolution frameworks. We even repurposed discarded Concordium data logs to reverse engineer their own decision-making matrices. 6 months? Elias stared at the screen. How did you develop interstellar mediation technology in 6 months? We didn't. Chancellor Sharma's voice came through the speakers. We developed it in 3 months. We've been beta testing it for the other 3. And we borrowed heavily from our historical records of conflict resolution and game theory, applying principles from ancient Terran peace treaties to modern interstellar disputes. The video showed human vessels. Not the primitive exploration vessels Earth had been using, but sleek, hyper-efficient diplomatic cruisers that moved with unsettling speed. The Terran Diplomatic Expedience Corps currently operates 47 vessels throughout the galaxy. Each ship is crewed by individuals who have been selected for their ability to deconstruct complexity under extreme time pressure. 47 ships! Grag's hum was barely a whisper. Our crews are trained in interspecies psychology, systemic vulnerability assessment, and adaptive protocol generation. The narrator continued. They have studied every known diplomatic deadlock and developed specific algorithms for resolving each one. The video cut to a classroom where humans were studying what appeared to be detailed flowcharts of various alien decision-making processes. Elias recognized several species he'd seen in the Concordium chambers, including the Cathar. For example, the narrator said, when dealing with the Cathar hegemony, our personnel are trained to exploit their reliance on measurable outputs. Humans can introduce abstract variables into their logical frameworks, creating internal inconsistencies that force a re-evaluation. Furthermore, our semantic realignment protocols exploit their unique linguistic processing, creating conceptual loops that lead to rapid reprioritization. That's impossible, Grag's hum. We are logically consistent. You are logically consistent within your framework. Humans introduce new frameworks. To your rigid systems, we're effectively an unforeseen variable, unless you choose to integrate us.
The video showed simulated Cthar negotiators struggling with rapidly changing terms and unexpected philosophical questions posed by human negotiators. Additionally, Cthar decision-making is optimized for resource allocation. In a negotiation scenario emphasizing intangible assets, their rigid focus on quantifiable wealth makes them slower and less agile than humans. "We are efficient," the second Cthar hummed, but his voice lacked conviction. "You are efficient within a defined system," the narrator agreed. "But you're not in a defined system. You're dealing with a species that has spent 3 million years learning to redefine the system when it's not working for them. You're also dealing with mediators who are exceptionally good at finding the path of least resistance for their own objectives." The video showed human negotiators skillfully guiding alien delegations toward mutually beneficial agreements that overwhelmingly favored Terran interests. Most importantly, the narrator continued, humans have one advantage that no other species possesses. We catalog every single inefficiency we encounter, and we share that information with every other human. The video cut to what appeared to be a massive interconnected database. The Terran Diplomatic Expedience Corps maintains detailed records on every potential bureaucratic and economic bottleneck. These records are updated in real time and shared instantaneously with all human diplomatic personnel. This means, the narrator explained, if you impede one human's objective, you're effectively impeding all humans' objectives. And if you create a systemic deadlock for one human, you're at war with all human ingenuity. And when a humanity goes to war with inefficiency, it's not just our diplomats who fight, it's our scientists, our engineers, our economists, and every citizen who contributes to our collective problem-solving capacity. The video ended with a shot of Chancellor Sharma on the bridge of what was presumably the negotiator. The Terran Diplomatic Expedience Corps exists to ensure the unhindered progress of human civilization wherever it may be. We do not seek conflict, but we will respond to any impedance with overwhelming conceptual disruption. The screen went dark, and then Chancellor Sharma's live image returned. "Professor Vance, are you ready for expedited resolution?"
Elias looked at the two Cathar, who were now pressed against the far wall of the room. They looked like logical machines who just realized their algorithms had a fatal flaw. "I think," Elias said slowly, "that there might be a significant reevaluation of parameters here." "No reevaluation needed," Chancellor Sharma replied. "Two rigid entities have isolated you and are discussing the subjective nature of value, creating a data flow bottleneck. This constitutes a clear threat to Terran trade initiatives." "But they haven't actually done anything yet," Elias protested. "They don't need to do anything," Chancellor Sharma said. "The potential for inefficient resource allocation is sufficient." "Chancellor," Grax said, his hum trembling slightly, "we meant no disrespect. We were simply curious about human negotiation methodologies." "Your curiosity," Chancellor Sharma replied, "has been noted and integrated into our predictive models. Professor Vance, please move to the expedited extraction point." "What extraction point?" "The one directly behind you." Elias turned around. The wall behind him was dissolving, revealing a sleek docking tube that definitely hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. On the other side, he could see human diplomats in what appeared to be very expensive, high-tech suits. "How did you?" "We've been docked for 10 minutes, Chancellor Sharma explained. "We were giving you time to resolve the situation with your preferred academic rigor. We had also quietly integrated with all internal Concordium network systems and prepared a rapid deployment team for conceptual intervention just in case. And if I hadn't resolved it, then we would have resolved it for you with extreme algorithmic restructuring. Elias looked back at the Cathar one more time. I'm sorry about this. I think there's been a series of, unoptimized communications. Professor Vance, the second Cathar hummed quietly, may I ask you a question? Sure. Are all humans like you, or her? Elias thought about it. No, I'm actually one of the more theoretically oriented ones. Many of us are far more result-driven. Grax made a sound that might have been a whimper or perhaps a low-frequency error message. Professor Vance, Chancellor Sharma said, expedited extraction in 30 seconds. As Elias stepped toward the docking tube, he heard Grax behind him. Chancellor, what would have happened if we had actually declared Professor Vance's research to be unquantifiable? Chancellor Sharma's reply followed him through the tube. You would have discovered why humans are the only species to have transformed their own planet's most complex societal issues into profitable global markets, and why the phrase disruptive innovation isn't just a metaphor for us. The docking tube sealed behind Elias, and he found himself on a human diplomatic vessel that definitely hadn't existed 6 months ago. But as he looked around at the advanced technology and the calm, professional crew, he began to suspect that there was a great deal about the last 6 months that he didn't know. Professor Vance, the Chancellor would like to see you on the bridge. We have a new proposal for the Xylos Collective and the Cathar hegemony ready for your review. Right, I suppose I should find out what I've missed. But as they walked through corridors that looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd spent considerable time thinking about how to out-negotiate aliens in space, Elias began to worry that he might have seriously underestimated his own species' capacity for strategic assertiveness.
The bridge of the UNS Negotiator looked like something from a high-stakes corporate thriller, assuming the movie had been made by someone who'd actually restructured galactic economies. The technology was sleek, functional, and undeniably geared towards rapid information processing and persuasive visualization. More importantly, it was operated by humans who moved with the casual competence of people who'd been doing this for years, rather than months. Professor Vance, Chancellor Sharma said, without turning around, "Please tell me you weren't planning to let them dismiss the Xylos claims as theatricality." "I wasn't planning to let them dismiss anything," Elias replied. "I was trying to understand their cognitive framework. It's called research." "Research," Chancellor Sharma repeated, "into species that refuse to acknowledge non-quantifiable value?" Research into whether humans could actually introduce new conceptual parameters, which, for the record, we absolutely could. I'm glad we agree on that. Chancellor Sharma finally turned around, and Elias got his first good look at someone who'd apparently been commanding interstellar arbitration vessels for months. "Professor Vance, we need to talk about what happened on Terra while you were gone, about what's been happening in the galaxy while you were gone. It's a rather unconventional market reevaluation." Elias looked around the bridge. The crew was young, professional, and disturbingly calm for people who'd just conducted what amounted to a diplomatic intervention. "Anya, how long have you been in space?" 4 months, actively deploying. We've been very busy, optimizing." 4 months? Elias repeated.
And in 4 months you've developed interstellar diplomatic capabilities, built 47 vessels, and established a core for conceptual intervention? 48 vessels, Chancellor Sharma corrected. The resolution launched yesterday. And we didn't develop new capabilities, Professor Vance. We simply repurposed our inherent capacity for pattern recognition, systemic analysis, and strategic leveraging for interstellar diplomacy. But existing capabilities? The same capabilities that got us through 3 million years of evolution on a planet that was actively trying to introduce unforeseen variables into our survival equation. Chancellor Sharma gestured to a wall display that showed star charts marked with various symbols. Professor Vance, what did you think was going to happen when we made first contact? Elias stared at the display. The symbols were color-coded: green for aligned interests, yellow for neutral, red for conflicting interests. There were a lot of red symbols. I thought we'd join the galactic community, learn from other species, share knowledge, and foster mutual prosperity. We did, Chancellor Sharma said. We learned that 17 species considered human technological progress to be quaint. We learned that 12 species considered Terra's intellectual property to be unclaimed. We learned that the Galactic Concordium has no effective enforcement mechanisms for protecting non-material assets. And perhaps most importantly, we learned that peace through diplomacy is often just a euphemism for peace through intellectual dominance for species clever enough to enforce it. That's not possible, Elias protested. The Concordium maintains peace through diplomacy and mutual cooperation. The Concordium maintains peace through the threat of economic sanctions and resource blockades, Chancellor Sharma corrected, which works fine when dealing with species that need galactic trade to survive. It doesn't work when dealing with species that prefer to unilaterally extract value. Many species mistook our lack of interstellar infrastructure for weakness, a mistake we've now begun to rectify with aggressive data-driven engagement. Elias felt that familiar prickle at the base of his skull. Anya, what exactly happened after first contact? We were invited to join the galactic community, Chancellor Sharma said. We were given access to galactic technology, galactic databases, and galactic politics. We were also informed that as a developing species, we would be under the guidance of the Concordium. That sounds reasonable. It was reasonable until we started reading the guidance protocols. Chancellor Sharma touched a control, and the wall display changed to show what appeared to be a legal document. Galactic Concordium Guidance Protocol 7 Alpha, she read. Developing member species may request assistance in the event of conceptual misunderstandings. Assistance will be provided within standard galactic processing times. How long are standard galactic processing times? 3 to 5 years for non-critical assets. Elias stared at the document. 3 to 5 years? Bureaucracy moves slowly when you're dealing with 23 different species spread across multiple star systems, Chancellor Sharma explained. The Concordium does excellent work, but they operate on generational timescales. They're not equipped to deal with immediate intellectual property disputes, so we decided to fast-track our own conceptual defense. So what did you do? We took responsibility for our own intellectual sovereignty, Chancellor Sharma said. We studied every species database we could access. We analyzed every known negotiation pattern. We identified every potential loophole in their own legal frameworks. And we discovered that humans have several advantages that other species don't possess. Advantages that were forged over millions of years of desperate cognitive expansion. Chancellor Sharma touched another control, and the display changed to show what appeared to be a comparative analysis chart. First, we're the only species that has experience dealing with multiple, often conflicting cognitive models simultaneously. Elias looked at the chart. Because Earth has multiple, often conflicting, human cultures and philosophies. Precisely, Chancellor Sharma confirmed. Most species evolve on planets with one dominant thought process. They develop strategies for dealing with that specific framework. We develop strategies for dealing with everything, from ancient philosophical paradoxes to quantum physics. We thrive on cognitive dissonance. Second, we're the only species that has developed technology specifically for reconfiguring abstract concepts into tangible solutions. Our data analysis technology.
Our entire intellectual framework, Chancellor Sharma corrected. Art, literature, mathematics, communication. Every piece of human intellectual endeavor was developed to solve the problem of being small, weak, and surrounded by unsolved mysteries. The display showed comparative intellectual output charts. Humans were behind other species in raw data storage, but significantly ahead in cross-domain synthesis and accelerated paradigm shifts. Third, Chancellor Sharma said, we're the only species that has experience with total intellectual mobilization. Total intellectual mobilization? Mobilization involving every thinking member of the species, Chancellor Sharma explained. Other species conduct debates between specialized groups. Humans conduct debates across entire populations. We've been doing it for thousands of years. It's a cultural trait. When our intellectual frontier is at stake, every human becomes a potential conceptual warrior. Elias looked at the data. Is that actually terrifying? It's effective, Chancellor Sharma said. When a human idea is threatened, every other human becomes a potential advocate. When a human innovation is threatened, every other human mind becomes a potential problem solver. We don't fight wars, we resolve conceptual impasses. And you've been applying this to galactic politics? We've been applying this to galactic intellectual freedom, Chancellor Sharma corrected. Professor Vance, in the last 4 months, we've prevented 6 different species from attempting to monopolize Terran-derived algorithms. We've stopped 11 attempts to co-opt human cultural narratives. We've neutralized 3 separate attempts to redistribute human scientific breakthroughs without due credit. And we've done it all with minimal loss of Terran intellectual capital, which is our paramount concern. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. Redistribute human scientific breakthroughs? Apparently, human breakthroughs in quantum entanglement communications have some unique properties that make them valuable for certain interstellar data networks. Several species were planning to establish open-source usage protocols for Terran inventions. That's intellectual theft. That's worse than theft. That's unilateral reappropriation, which is why we're not doing business with those species anymore. And they are no longer in a position to reappropriate anything from anyone else for that matter. Elias looked around the bridge. The crew was young, but they moved with the confidence of people who'd engaged in high-stakes conceptual warfare and emerged victorious. Anya, what have you done? We've established the Terran sphere of conceptual influence. Any species that impedes human intellectual freedom or human innovation is informed that they are now facing systemic optimization by humanity. Any species that respects human intellectual property is welcome to trade, cooperate, and coexist. And if they don't respect human intellectual property, then they discover why humans are the only species to have formalized every abstract thought process on their homeworld. even the seemingly illogical ones, given enough time and determination. The display changed to show what appeared to be a tactical map. Elias could see star systems marked with various symbols, data flow routes, and what looked like intellectual property zones.
Professor Vance, what did you think was going to happen when galactic powers discover that human ingenuity makes for a valuable, unclaimed resource? I thought we'd be protected by the Concordium. The Concordium protects species that can't defend their material assets, Chancellor Sharma said. We can defend our conceptual assets. We've been defending them for 3 million years. Our emergence as a galactic intellectual power was inevitable, merely accelerated by the short-sightedness of others. By building vessels and threatening other species? By making it clear that attempting to exploit human intellectual property is not a profitable strategy, Chancellor Sharma corrected. Professor Vance, we don't start conflicts, we resolve them definitively. Elias was quiet for a long moment. The Cathar delegation, they were just considering whether to acknowledge the Xylo's claims. They hadn't actually stolen anything yet. They had isolated you and were discussing the inherent irrationality of subjective value, creating a data flow bottleneck, Chancellor Sharma said. That constitutes a threat assessment phase to our economic models. We respond to threats in the assessment phase to prevent them from becoming operational phases. That's actually very reasonable. It's efficient, Chancellor Sharma said. Most species issue warnings, then escalate through several phases of conflict before responding with force. We issue one warning, then respond with overwhelming conceptual disruption. It saves everyone time and resources, and if they don't understand the warning, then they learn very quickly. Elias looked at the tactical display. Anya, how many species have you been at conceptual odds with? Technically, none. Technically? We've never officially declared conceptual warfare on any species. We've simply made it clear that certain behaviors will result in immediate algorithmic countermeasures. Most species have chosen to modify their behavior rather than test our resolve. And the ones that have tested your resolve have discovered that humans are very good at learning from their cognitive errors. And we're even better at making sure those errors don't happen again. Elias thought about the Cathar delegation, probably still pressed against the wall of the Concordium chamber, trying to understand what had just happened. Anya, what do you think is going to happen now? Now, the Cathar will report to their hegemony that human approaches to value are unpredictably influential. They'll probably recommend that their species avoid challenging Terran intellectual property entirely. They may even spread warnings about us. And if they don't, then they'll discover why humans are the only species to have successfully transformed their own planet's most abstract concepts into dominant global frameworks. And one more thing, Chancellor Sharma said. Professor Vance, we're not the naive, technologically underdeveloped species the galaxy thinks we are. We're the species that turned every other cognitive framework on our planet into either a scientific discipline, an art form, or, in some cases, a cautionary tale for our children about logical fallacies. Elias was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd learned. Anya, there's something I need to tell you about my conversation with the Cathar. What about it? I may have implied that humans are significantly more conceptually aggressive than they actually are. Chancellor Sharma turned to look at him. Implied how? I may have suggested that humans are relentless problem solvers who turn recontextualization into a survival strategy, that we have disrupted multiple galactic economic systems through superior understanding of subjective value rather than superior force, and that we have a 3 million-year track record of fundamentally reshaping anything that impedes our progress." Chancellor Sharma was quiet for a moment. "Professor Vance, what do you think we are? When faced with an existential threat to our intellectual domain, humanity has always chosen to become whatever it needs to be to achieve optimal outcomes."
Before Elias could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. A voice came over the intercom. "Chancellor, to the bridge. We have multiple contacts approaching at high velocity." "Contacts?" Elias asked. Chancellor Sharma was already moving to her command station. 16 vessels, Cathar configuration, approaching from the edge of the system. She looked at Elias. "Professor Vance, it appears the Cathar hegemony decided to test our resolve, or perhaps their own algorithmic integrity." 16 ships. Elias stared at the tactical display. "That's not a delegation. That's a market takeover attempt." "That's a miscalculation," Chancellor Sharma corrected. She touched a control. "All stations, battle stations. Comms, open a channel to the Cathar fleet." "Channel open." "Cathar vessels, this is Chancellor Sharma of the Terran Diplomatic Expedience Corps. You are approaching human-aligned space with hostile economic intent. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences of unilateral market restructuring." The response came back in the grinding hum Elias recognized as Grax's. "Chancellor Sharma, you have insulted the logical framework of the Cathar hegemony. We demand conceptual vindication." "You demand conceptual vindication? For what?" "You have claimed that human conceptual models are superior to Cathar pragmatism. You have suggested that your fluid value systems could overcome our quantifiable truths. This intellectual affront cannot be allowed to stand." Elias looked at Chancellor Sharma. "They're not here to fight. They're here to prove their philosophical superiority." "I see," Chancellor Sharma said. "Grax, you're demanding a conceptual debate to determine which species' framework is superior?" "Precisely. A debate between our finest logician and your finest conceptualizer. When we defeat your champion, you will acknowledge Cathar pragmatic supremacy and submit to our unimpeded resource extraction rights." Chancellor Sharma was quiet for a moment. "And if your champion loses?" "Impossible! No human could outlogic a Cathar logician in a fair debate." "I see," Chancellor Sharma said. "Professor Vance, what's your assessment of Cathar debate psychology?" Elias thought about his conversation with the delegation. "They're honor-bound by their logical consistency. They can't back down from a challenge without losing algorithmic integrity. But they also can't conceptualize losing to what they consider inferior, non-quantifiable thought processes. So if we accept their challenge and win, they'll be forced to acknowledge human conceptual superiority. However, they are likely to attribute any human victory to semantic tricks rather than genuine prowess. If we accept their challenge and win, they'll probably assume we cheated somehow. But yes, theoretically, they'd be bound by honor. And if we refuse the challenge, they'll assume we're intellectually timid and proceed with their market takeover attempt anyway." Chancellor Sharma nodded. "Grax, we accept your challenge. Conceptual debate, winner takes all. On your vessel, our champion, our rules." "Excellent," came the reply. "We will send our finest logician to your vessel. Prepare your conceptualizer." The channel closed, and Chancellor Sharma turned to Elias. "Professor Vance, I need you to be our champion." Elias stared at her. I'm sorry, what? You're going to debate their logician? Anya, I'm a socio-economist and an expert in interstellar trade agreements. I study market dynamics. I don't engage in philosophical duels with alien logicians. You're also the person who convinced two highly pragmatic, resource-focused entities that human subjectivity holds immeasurable value, Chancellor Sharma pointed out. I'd say you're qualified. That was persuasive rhetoric, not logical combat. Professor Vance, Chancellor Sharma said, what do you know about Cathar debate traditions? Elias thought about it. They're ritualistic debaters. They argue according to specific protocols that demonstrate logical rigor, factual accuracy, consistent axioms, deductive reasoning. And what do you know about human debate traditions? We don't really have debate traditions. We have persuasion traditions. Exactly, Chancellor Sharma said. Cathar debate according to rules. Humans debate to reframe the argument. But they're 4 meters tall and have a logic core that can process data faster than a supercomputer. And you're the person who convinced them that humans are more dangerous than they are, Chancellor Sharma said. Professor Vance, you've already won this debate. You just haven't realized it yet. Your weapon is your ability to redefine terms, and you've already proven it sharper than their logic gates. Before Elias could protest further, the tactical display showed a new contact approaching the ship. Professor Vance, your opponent is arriving. The debate arena was a hastily reconfigured cargo bay, stripped bare save for 2 central podiums. The air was thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and ozone from the Cathar's data projectors. Elias had asked if the lack of comfort gave him an advantage. Only if you can leverage it for rhetorical impact, had been the helpful reply. The Cathar champion was Xylar, grand logician of the first axiom, bearer of unassailable proofs. He stood nearly 4.5 meters tall and projected an aura of unyielding, cold rationality. Elias was introduced as Professor Elias Vance, Doctor of Socio-Economics and bearer of a very flexible outlook. This is ridiculous. I'm going to be out-logicked horribly, and it's going to be recorded for posterity. Professor Vance, Chancellor Sharma's voice came through a discreet calm. What's the first rule of human conceptual triumph? Redefine the parameters before your opponent can, Chancellor Sharma corrected before Elias could answer. You're debating according to human rules, not Cathar rules. Remember your own research, Professor. Humans don't just react, they innovate paradigms under pressure. The Concordium representative explained the protocols. Conceptual debate, no physical interaction, argument until logical concession or systemic collapse. Any questions? The representative asked. Elias raised his hand. Are there restrictions on semantic ambiguity or the strategic use of historical precedent as philosophical metaphor? Conceptual communication is not restricted so long as it adheres to Concordium-recognized linguistic structures, came the confused reply. Excellent. Elias looked at Xylar, who was performing elaborate data projections, displaying his species' logical prowess. Hey, Xylar, have you ever debated something that's been wrestling with its own inherent irrationality for 3 million years? The massive logician paused, his data projections flickering. What? Most of your logic evolved to be precise,
quantifying, categorizing, proving. But humans evolved to deal with the inherently messy, the subjective, the absurd. Terra doesn't have one single logical framework. We have dozens, and we learn to exploit the gaps between every single one of them. Elias began to pace the debate area. From ancient sophistry to modern quantum philosophy, from economic bubbles to social revolutions, we even had a phase where we debated the existence of reality itself for sport. Talk about a dangerous opponent. "You are attempting to introduce emotional variables," Xylar hummed. "I'm explaining why you're about to lose this debate. It's a statistical inevitability, really. Your adherence to rigid quantifiers will be your downfall." Xylar's data projections intensified, and he began to rapidly present a series of irrefutable logical arguments. Elias didn't engage directly. He simply recontextualized the argument. "See, humans are really good at shifting the goalposts when the current game isn't in their favor. You cannot avoid the axiomatic truth, Terran." "I'm not avoiding it. I'm demonstrating superior conceptual mobility, a core principle of ancient Terran disruptive thinking. This is how humans debate. We use lateral thinking and rhetorical reframing." "You are being illogical." "I'm utilizing interpretive flexibility while conducting real-time paradigm assessment, which suggests you've never debated anything that could redefine the very nature of the debate. Your reliance on established proofs, while numerically impressive, indicates a predictable pattern of argument that's easily subverted."
Xylar accelerated his logical proofs again, bombarding Elias with data. Elias simply began telling a long, rambling story about a historical human philosopher who proved the non-existence of a chair by sitting on it. Xylar's data projections sputtered. "You debate without rigor. I debate to win. Rigidity is what you worry about when you're not concerned about conceptual dominance," he continued pacing. "Your species relies on raw processing power and deductive certainty, but I exist in a realm of ambiguity, and I'm smaller than anything you've probably encountered in a debate. And I've spent my career analyzing how societies with limited raw power overcame overwhelming logical opposition. It's truly fascinating. I will adapt. Adaptation is humanity's specialty. We've been doing it for 3 million years." Elias introduced another tangential anecdote about the invention of abstract art. Xylar's internal processors whirred loudly. "I know your logical framework has a blind spot for nonlinear reasoning. Your deductive processes are optimized for binary outcomes. Your current data overload indicates conceptual anxiety. You're not debating a primitive species. You're debating a species that learned to be better at reconceptualizing reality than our own philosophers." Each logical counter-argument from Xylar was noticeably slower. He was processing heavily, his data projections becoming disjointed. "You're getting computationally exhausted," Elias observed. "Humans have persistence in conceptual warfare. We don't win debates by being faster or logically sounder in a narrow context. We're more stubbornly relentless at shifting the context. Humans are the only species to have transformed entire fields of study by simply refusing to accept the prevailing assumptions. It's less about the logical kill and more about the conceptual break." "I will not concede," Xylar hummed, his processors straining. "You don't have to concede. Just keep debating until your logical framework collapses. That's what happens when you encounter an unforeseen conceptual variable. And that's what's happening now."
The Cathar logician tried to project another series of proofs, but his systems flickered. He crashed to the floor, his carapace humming erratically. Elias walked over. The difference between us is that I'm not a rigid system pretending to be fluid. I'm a fluid system pretending to be rigid. I think he's ready to yield to superior conceptualization now, he called to the observation deck. How did you defeat me without a single irrefutable proof? Xylar hummed, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't defeat you. You defeated yourself. I just made you work harder than your conceptual capacity could sustain. You're trying to fit a multi-dimensional truth into a single-dimensional logic gate. But you are illogical. No, I'm a human. We're the species that looked at every philosophical problem on our planet and said, I bet we can think about that better. And then we did. We innovated, we strategized, and we persisted conceptually. It's just what we do. Chancellor Sharma's voice came over the intercom. Conceptual debate concluded. Human victory confirmed. After a long silence, Grox's voice came through communications. This is not possible. Xylar is our greatest logician. According to Cathar's standards of deductive reasoning, Elias replied, but you're debating according to human standards of conceptual disruption. What is human standard? Optimal outcome by any intellectual means necessary. We don't debate fair. We debate to win. And we leverage every single piece of knowledge we've ever acquired, from ancient rhetoric to advanced linguistics, to achieve that. After another silence, we acknowledge human conceptual superiority. We will reconsider our assessment of human capabilities. A formal proposal for expedited resolution of the Xylos dispute, with compensation reflecting intangible value, will be sent to Terra. Elias looked down at Xylar one final time. You're an impressive logician. On your homeworld, you'd probably outreason me in 3 seconds on a quantifiable problem. Then why do I feel I have learned nothing about logic and everything about epistemological humility? Because you just discovered the difference between being a specialist and being human. Specialists are evolved to master specific frameworks. Humans are evolved to master the framework of frameworks. It's a subtle but critical distinction, one you won't soon forget. 20 minutes later, Elias was back on the bridge, watching the Cathar fleet departing at maximum velocity. Anya, I think we may have accidentally started something. A complete reevaluation of humanity's intellectual position in the galactic hierarchy. Every species in the galaxy is going to want to know what else we're capable of, and what our definition of appropriate strategic realignment truly entails. Professor Vance, what do you think happens next? The galaxy is about to discover that humans don't just survive as a species, we thrive on complexity. And we're very good at helping other species understand the difference. Perhaps I'll write a new paper, The Socio-Economic Impact of Unconventional Intellectual Dominance, a Terran case study. Any regrets about the consulting position? Elias thought about it. He'd expected to explain basic economic principles to alien bureaucrats. Instead, he'd participated in humanity's debut as a galactic conceptual superpower. None whatsoever. Although I'm definitely going to need vacation time and a very long, very quiet meta-analysis session. I don't think this is ever going to be over, Chancellor Sharma said. This is just the beginning of optimal galactic engagement. Elias looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Alien species were updating their conceptual threat assessments and trying to figure out what it meant to share a galaxy with humans. You know what? I'm okay with that. After 3 million years of being misunderstood, it's nice to be doing the conceptual re-education for a change. Welcome to the Terran Diplomatic Expedience Corps, Professor Vance. I didn't agree to join. You just defeated a Cathar logician using human socio-economic theory and basic rhetoric, then effectively facilitated an interstellar conceptual understanding. You're already a member. The paperwork is just a formality. Elias sighed. I don't suppose there's a pension plan. The pension plan is that your species gets to intellectually dominate and thrive among the stars. That's not a bad pension plan. Plus, we have excellent conceptual health insurance, and occasionally a private shuttle to Terra for research expeditions that happen to coincide with your favorite academic conferences on the absurdity of interspecies bureaucracy. As the negotiator set course for Terra, Elias settled into his role as socio-economic expert and inadvertent conceptual warrior. Behind them, 16 Cathar ships carried word that humans were not the naive, simple species the galaxy had believed. And somewhere in the galactic communications network, alien species were updating their databases with crucial information. When humans said they were dangerous, they weren't making a threat. They were making a strategic promise of conceptual realignment.